I'm just from over the hill in Lander, and I just have to say it is such a delight anytime I get to come over to County 3. It is like, it's greener, there's just a little bit more going on. And yeah, so thanks to all of you for hosting us and me. I'm a fiction writer. I grew up in Maine, but I've lived in Wyoming off and on mostly for the last 30 years. I finished my undergrad at UW. And my writing, I'm not going to get too deep into it. I'm just mostly going to read. But there's sort of a tension in my work between Maine and Wyoming and Maine and the West. My work is really sort of centered in place. And so I have a collection of stories that came out last summer. It's on the back. It's for sale if you want to buy it. But I'm going to read from my novel in progress today, which is tentatively titled Nobody's Going to Save You. And it is set in Maine. So with that, I'm going to try and be real conscious of time, too. All right. When I was very young, my father built a simple square shed behind our house, right at the edge of the woods. He wanted a place to hang his whitetails in the fall, a closed-in structure where he could cool the animals out with no worry of scavengers. By the time I was 7 or 8, he was passing most evenings and weekends out there, listening to the Red Sox, drinking his beers in peace. My mother never ventured that way, but I spent hours inside that drafty building, perched on a tall metal stool and painting small scraps of wood, trying the sips of Budweiser he offered, which I swallowed down and pretended to like. Sometimes we'd catch sight of my mother through the bank of grimy windows over his workbench, trailing a garden hose through the flower beds or standing cross-armed on the porch with a cocktail and a half-smoked parliament, gazing off like she was expecting someone to come rushing up our wooded drive. I asked Dad once what it was he thought she was waiting for. He set down his beer can and came to stand beside me, and we peered for a long time through the murky glass. If I knew that kiddo, I'd be a very happy man. Even before he strung himself up from the joists with a blue extension cord the year I turned 15, the damp space felt haunted to me. Its bare bulbs cast strange shadows onto the tools that cluttered the pegboard walls, and lining the rows of shelves like specimens in a museum were glass jars filled, not as I liked to pretend, with floating eyeballs or wrinkled gray fetuses, but with an archive of metal fasteners, wing nuts, lag bolts, washers, nails, screws, tiny bits of wire, anything he imagined might one day be of use. Yankee ingenuity, he said whenever I lifted a jar down to inspect its contents. 3/4 of what's busted in the world could be fixed if folks had a little more patience. Patience being something my father himself must have run short on in the end. On the morning of his funeral, I found Ma flinging old dishes from the kitchen cupboards into a pile on the linoleum. A half-empty Bloody Mary stood on the counter, garnished with a stalk of translucent celery from the bunch Dad had bought the last time he'd made deer stew. What was it the school counselor had told me? Grief won't look any one way. Ma, what are you doing? All this stuff, Rosie, it's too much, it's weighing us down. She looked like a madwoman at a bonfire. Beneath the growing heap of dishes, the deep enamel pot we used to boil lobsters, the plastic colander I'd nested on my head when I was little, lay a bunch of checked flannels and pit-stained undershirts. I dug around, discovered Dad's spare boots, his coveralls embroidered with the shipyard's logo, the forest green hard hat sporting the Union insignia, and a unicorn sticker he'd let me paste on when I was 8. He'd been dead for 9 whole days. I lifted a blaze orange hunting vest from the pile and zipped it to my chin. It's not weighing me down. Ma stopped rifling through the cupboards to look at me. She wasn't yet 40, but her hair had gone completely gray, which she liked to say was my fault. One of my earliest memories is of my mother telling me she'd never wanted kids. And even then, young as I was, I assured myself she didn't mean that I specifically was unwanted. She pushed the hair out of her face and swirled the flaccid celery in her glass. You don't want that ugly old thing, she said. She reached for the cigarette balanced on the sink's edge, then started to nod slowly, pointing it at me. No, she said, actually, yeah, that's good. You should keep it. The two of you. She trailed off and ashed into the drain. Until my father died, the distance between my mother and me had always seemed fixed, navigable. Suddenly, that distance was expanding rapidly and in all directions, the way my science teacher said the universe had been doing for billions of years. Was there some way to slow it down? Some way to retrieve all the far-flung, careening pieces and stuff them back into something singular and dense and whole? And was that really my job, keeping my mother close, making her love me? The two of us what? I said, shoving my fists into the vest's deep pockets. You act like we were united against you. Ma laughed. Something jabbed my knuckle. From the pocket, I pulled a lint-covered key tied with a red curl of ribbon. My mind tore ahead of itself, conjuring a metal lockbox on one of the shed's highest shelves, a handwritten note folded and stuffed inside. What's this? I said, holding up the key. Maybe the note would explain everything, what had gone wrong, how we could fix it. I was 15, but some childish part of me believed we might still go back and make things right. Ma squinted at me over her drink, then dropped her cigarette in the sink. Who knows, she said. With a grunt, she climbed onto the counter and began to wrestle a set of nested Tupperwares from the cabinet over the fridge. There were 5 bowls, each a different color of the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, and their plastic coating was flaking like sunburned skin from too many turns in the microwave. She flung the stack toward the pile on the kitchen floor, and the bowls came unnested mid-flight and went skittering across the linoleum. Your father hung on to everything except what really mattered. I have heard hard times be likened to a crucible, the implication being that the pressure of an untenable situation leads to the forging of something beautiful and new. It's a lovely idea, creation from the ashes, what doesn't kill you and all that. And I am sure if my mother and I were different people, life could have unfolded that way for us. We might have stood shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the abyss and stared it down together, battle-scarred warriors facing the foe of a lifetime. But the 12 months between my father's suicide and my mother's driving away forever were less crucible than hurricane. Once the storm passed, the house still stood, but the landscape was unrecognizable. It was hard to imagine anything, beautiful or otherwise, rising from that mess. I did not make it to my father's funeral. As soon as Ma stepped in the shower, I grabbed a cigarette from her purse and hurried down our front steps, past Dad's hunting shed and his beloved '78 Nova, which was the color of rust and whose hood was strewn with red leaves from the sugar maple. Out on the highway, I caught a ride to my first keg party. The party was at the beach, very frigid and damp in December, and I got predictably drunk and predictably felt up by 2 varsity lacrosse players who were angling to play D1 at Dartmouth. I downed another beer and told them my father hung himself. This shut them up, and they got busy with my bra and jeans. First, they had to unzip the orange vest. Behind a crude driftwood lean-to, I lay on the half-frozen sand, listening to the distant bark of gulls and adolescent laughter and waves crashing on shore, sensing, though just barely, the crab-like scuttle of hands across my body. I could not have cared less what happened to me. At one point, I opened my eyes to see a girl with close-cropped hair and black combat boots bending over the boys who were bending over me. She yanked them back and called them assholes, shot out a boot, and sent the driftwood flying. What the fuck, I said groggily. We're fine, which of course the boys were saying too. Shut up, she told me, pulling me to my feet, yanking my jeans back up over my butt. She hauled me across the beach to her car, a silver 2-door Honda parked at the far edge of the nearly empty lot. How strange, I thought, as I slid into her passenger seat. How strange to be in this girl's car. You are a fucking idiot, she said. And she lit one cigarette after another as we flew over the winding hills. I leaned back and closed my eyes. How strange it all was. This girl and her fury, those boys, my dead father and my unmoored mother. I kept my eyes closed and listened as the girl berated me, her voice raspy and sure. How strange, I thought, how much she seems to care. When I opened my eyes, we were parked at the end of my wooded drive. I sat up fast, my heart pounding like surf in a storm. It's okay, she said, you gave me directions right before you told me you wanted to kiss me. She tossed a paperback onto her dash. On its cover, I saw a bunch of stark letters overlain by a Gothic bud on a thorny dark stem. Don't worry, I didn't let you. She dug a pen from the console, then grabbed my hand and pushed up my sleeve. When she saw the bandage covering the stitches on my wrist, she stopped short and gave me a look. No, I said quickly, shaking my head, it's not that. I blinked as she scrawled a number and name onto my skin, just above the bandage. Jade Berlin. I want you to call me, she said. What's your name? I nodded toward the book on the dash. She looked at it, then back to me, puzzled. Sylvia Plath? Rose. I studied her, the nearly shaved head and the lock of black hair that fell over her eyes, her small ears studded with piercings. At the beach, she'd had on some kind of bulky army jacket, but now, in the heat of the idling car, she wore only a tattered black tee. A dazzling tattoo wound along the length of her muscled right arm, jewel-colored grapes and berries, tumbling apples, a dimpled melon, a luscious dripping peach. Impulsively, I reached to touch it. Did it hurt? I asked, tracing a finger along a sinewy vine. She studied me for a moment and smiled. Everything hurts. I'll stop there.